Okay. Hello, everyone. To reintroduce myself, my name is Jade. I'm from the South Shore of Boston, and I just graduated from UMass Amherst, where I studied political science and natural resources conservation. And I'm interested in sustainable development and regional planning. So in the fall, I'll be enrolled in a master's program for that. During my undergraduate studies, I learned a lot about environmental justice. And for my thesis last year, I studied an environmental justice related topic. And so that was something that I knew I wanted to bring to this internship for my independent project. And so before I jump into my project deliverable, I just want to go over a few key terms just so we're all familiar with the basis of my project and why I thought it was something important. And then go over my process of creating the toolkit. And then hopefully, if the technology allows, I'll be able to pull up. So my toolkit is a website. So hopefully we'll be able to pull up the website and then explore that a little bit. So, to start off, environmental justice, some people may understandably confuse it with environmentalism, which is care and protection for the planet and natural environment. But environmental justice takes that a step further by connecting it with social justice. And so, this is the American Public Health Association's definition, which is environmental justice is the idea that all people and communities have the right to live and thrive in safe, healthy environments with equal environmental protections and meaningful involvement in these actions. So there are quite a few definitions of environmental justice, but I wanted to highlight this one because I think the language used really underscores in kind of a simple way what I consider to be the three pillars of environmental justice. So firstly, environmental justice deals with recognition justice, so ensuring that all communities and people are respected and represented in these efforts. Secondly, with the language of equal environmental protections, they address distributive justice, which is ensuring that all these communities and people that are represented have equal distribution of environmental risk and protection. And then lastly, procedural justice, which is ensuring that decision-making processes are inclusive, fair, and transparent for everyone involved. So I think a short and sweet summary of environmental justice is care for planet and people. And so environmental justice is a really important topic, I believe, because the studies have shown and just life, people's lived experiences have shown that the climate crisis and its impacts do not impact us all equally. There are certain populations that are more vulnerable to the risks of the climate crisis and disproportionately suffer environmental hazards or harm. And so some of these more vulnerable populations can include low income individuals and families, people of color, indigenous people, immigrants, and individuals with limited English proficiency, as well as elders and children and youth. And so that makes up a lot of the population. And so if our environmental efforts are not targeted to serve them, then so many people are being left behind. And so I learned early on through this internship, I think from Lou in one of our early coaching sessions, he had mentioned that the state of Massachusetts has environmental justice populations that are identified by the state. And the state has a great interactive mapping tool, which highlights where these populations are located. And so so the Massachusetts Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs oversees an Office of Environmental Justice and Equity, which has defined the criteria for what counts as an environmental justice population in the state of Massachusetts. And so the four criteria that they use to identify these populations are: one, if the annual median household income is 65% or less than the state annual median household income; two, if minorities make up 40% or more of the population; three, if 25% or more of the households identify as speaking English less than very well; and then four is kind of a combination of a few of those identity factors. And so the state in 2022 identified 41 environmental justice populations on Cape Cod. There are 54 on Cape Cod, including the Cape and the islands. There's 54, but there's 41 on Cape Cod. And so these communities are highlighted here on the map. This is from the Office of Environmental Justice and Equity's mapping tool. And so 48.8% of the environmental justice populations on Cape Cod have met the criteria based on their income level. And then the other, about 50% match it for either minority or minority and income combined. And then there's one community in Barnstable that met the criteria for their minority population and English isolation levels. And then there's also one in Barnstable that met the criteria for all three. And so this is thousands of people that are classified as environmental justice populations. And so I think these people should definitely have access to targeted and centralized resources, which brings me to my project of creating an environmental justice toolkit as a way to provide a centralized, accessible, and community-informed resource for these populations and organizations working with these populations across Cape Cod. And so I hope that this toolkit will serve and empower the Cape's environmental justice communities and ultimately foster a more just and sustainable future for all. And so my process for creating this toolkit, I had the idea to create a centralized resource because I had done some Google searches, saw that there were a lot of organizations and support programs for these populations, but the kind of communication of these resources may be kind of segmented. There was no one-stop shop for these communities to kind of look to as a starting point to learn about environmental justice, to learn about the available support and assistance programs that are here on the Cape, as well as advocacy opportunities. And so I firstly connected with a few local environmental justice community leaders and community members. So I wanted to acknowledge them all here. I met with the Cape Cod branch of the NAACP, Susan Starkey of the Faith Communities Environmental Network, who has so graciously joined us today. So thank you for coming. Tara Vegas Wallace of Amplify POC and the Social and Economic Justice Institute that is based out of Four Seas. And so I really wanted to make this a community-informed resource, learn from people living here and experiencing these challenges, like what is most important to them, what types of available support are they aware of, what do they think other people should be aware of, and just get community feedback on how to make this as helpful and accessible as possible. So then I researched existing environmental justice resources for inspiration, and then ultimately decided to make a website for my toolkit, because that was another thing that I was discussing with these community members and leaders was what is the best format to reach these communities? Would it be a flyer? Would it be an in-person educational session? Would it be an online resource? And we came to the decision that an online resource would be the most accessible and feasible within the time allotted for the internship. And so I divided my resource into three sections, one being education, so providing environmental justice education. The second being support, so an overview of some support programs that are available here on the Cape for environmental justice populations, as well as a list of community engagement opportunities and civic engagement opportunities, and then a consolidated contact and resource directory. And so, as I mentioned, environmental justice connects environmentalism with social justice. So the natural environment affects so many different facets of our livelihood. And so some of the main themes and topics that I've covered in the toolkit are climate and climate change, housing, health, transportation, and language access. So hopefully if we press on the link, it'll take us to the website. Okay. Okay. Yeah, so this is the website. So this is the landing page. The URL is capecoddenvironmentaljustice.wordpress.com. So any of you can access it on your own time if you would like. But if you scroll down to the bottom, this is just kind of the mission of the toolkit. We have an overview of what I explained to you all beforehand about environmental justice, kind of how it's connected with a bunch of different aspects of our lives and what environmental justice populations are. And then if you scroll up to the top, there's a tab that will direct you to the different sections that I mentioned. So education, support, and advocacy. Um, the education section is just a bunch of, it dives a little bit deeper into environmental justice and its importance, the 3 pillars of environmental justice, the map for EJ populations on Cape Cod, and then some of the key challenges on Cape Cod. And then further up, the support section is divided by the central themes of the toolkit, and there's just an overview of some local support and assistance programs. Because I cannot cover everything, especially in the time allotted, this is not an exhaustive list or anything, but I think it can serve as a starting point for environmental justice communities to learn about the support that's out there for them. Advocacy is kind of a similar thing, and then there is a directory of different contacts for advocacy, different organizations working in this realm. And then because language access was a central theme that came up during my conversations with community members and is really central to environmental justice, I really tried to make it a point to translate my website. And so unfortunately, I was only able to translate the Spanish homepage and education section, but I minored in Spanish in college, been learning Spanish my whole life, and my last Spanish class actually was a translations course. So I learned all about the importance of language access and just ensuring that everybody has equitable access to specifically educational resources. But in the future, I would love to potentially get it into Portuguese as well and translate the other tabs. But that was my project. So thank you for listening.
Any questions? Someone can take the mic.
Is anyone going to maintain this or keep it going after you move on to grad school? Congrats, by the way.
Yeah, potentially. I mean, I could leave it up to next year's interns if anybody wants to continue it. I also on the website did list my like Mass HCIC email if anybody had any comments or concerns that if I still have access to the email, I'll periodically check. I think today I might try to finish the Spanish translations, but we'll see.
This was fantastic. Really, really great idea. I'm really concerned about the attack on our choice of words. And as you know, environmental justice programs verbiage is being taken down or unfunded. And I don't think we should quit doing this. I think it's very important, but I think we need to think about different ways to express the same thing. And I don't know if you've been down that road at all. For example, in my mind, environmentalism is not the environment separate from people, but we're all connected. Exactly. So I don't know if you, in your studies or with your thesis and so forth, if you had any opportunity to be thinking about how do we address the same issue with different language that may not be blanked out.
Yeah, that's totally a valid concern. I mean, when I was researching now, a bunch of the like federal environmental justice resources had been taken down. I had to find them through permalinks and people who had archived them on their own time. And so I think we had heard from Lori Schumann during our speaker series, who had worked under the Biden administration under like climate and housing. And she she kind of spoke to this and how we have to kind of reframe our messaging around like environmental justice and really convey that it benefits everyone. It's justice for all. And so I don't know, the language that I've been using up to this date has been environmental justice or like eco justice, climate justice, but I definitely agree that there needs to be kind of a shift in language to make it more approachable for everyone. Yeah.
Stephanie and Sean and I did a workshop 3 months ago, and it's on YouTube, and it includes a whole section on language and how we can simplify and just make more appropriate language that doesn't come across as woke.